What's up, everybody? Welcome to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesar Sportsbook. I'm Katie Mox. Today we're talking college football, and we would not talk college football with anyone else but Colby Dant of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. Colby, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
I am doing great, and thanks for having me. And look, we preview every single team in college football, which there's 133. So season can't come soon enough. By the time like mid-August hits, you're like, okay, just get me to the season.
Well, here's the thing that I don't understand. Why is it called Week 0? Because every team doesn't play, but it still exists. To call it it's Week 1. It's Week 1.
Yes, 100%. And look, this is why this is the beautiful thing about college football is it's always unorthodox, right? Yeah. And it historically, it's always been unorthodox, and it makes no sense. You are completely correct. Why wouldn't you call it just Week 1? But I don't know. I think it was back in the 1980s, a team decided to play a week before the whole season, and then a few other teams started doing it, and now look what we got.
Well, now we got the Irish in Ireland, which, by the way, I was looking at those lines. What is it, 21, 20 and a half? I'm not a religious person, but I do feel like Jesus doesn't want you to bet against the Irish in Ireland.
That's fair, especially knowing the fact that everyone in that stadium is going to be a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know what to do with that game because you have these rule changes where you have this running clock now in college football, much more aligned with the NFL, and it's supposed to rain all day. So I kind of feel like maybe you take the points. I thought it was one of the harder games of Week 0 to understand. Navy's also shifting their entire offensive philosophy. So we've never seen Navy do this out of they're going to be running out of the shotgun, which, we've never seen historically ever in the history of Navy football, which is 130 years of football. So I ended up taking the points just because of the rainstorm. I don't feel great about that play, but I'm fascinated to watch it.
All right, I'm fascinated to watch it as well. One more, we'll get into other things, but another Week 0 game that I want to get your take on. I'm from San Jose. USC laying 31 against the Spartans. Is there any chance that San Jose could keep this within 30?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I had a chance. I was at Mountain West Media Day. I got to interview their head coach, Brent Brennan, and I think he was a little more confident in his team than I expected. Their quarterback was voted first team All Mountain West in Chevin Cordero, and he's playing for something a little more special. He's from Hawaii, and I know that he's been outspoken on the tragic events that have happened there. So I think they have enough offense. They returned their entire offensive line, their running back, their wideout, and I think they have enough offense to stay within that number. Obviously, I still think USC is going to win, but
no crazy upset here in Week 0.
I wish, but no, I don't think it's going to happen there.
I don't think it's going to happen there either, but let's go Spartans. All right. One thing that I'm so curious to get your opinion on is this realignment of the Pac-12. You're a California guy, so this has to do with some California teams. Big picture, how does the collapse of the Pac-12 affect college football?
See, this is a tricky question because, I think it's terrible personally, but yes. I'm a traditionalist.
Purist.
Yeah, I love college football based on the college football that I grew up on, regionality that, a lot of people I don't think know the history of college football. College football is the reason why we play football. They created the sport. They created the sport back in the late 1860s. That is before Major League Baseball ever played their first game, right? And regionality has always been the blueprint of college football. The innovation, of college football. The NFL you watch, I love the NFL like anybody else, but at the same time, you're not seeing the most innovating things right now. In the NFL, you start to see the air raid, and that's been in college football since Mike Leach brought it in the late 1980s. The 3-3-5 defense, all these things. It started in college football, and it started with taking a smaller school that would be going up against the big guys. Well, how can we get creative about beating these guys?
Yeah.
So I personally think it's awful, but at the same time, I also think I'm in the minority probably. I think that they're creating this gap. I think they're going to create this gap where you're going to have this gigantic playoff and these gigantic conferences, and it's going to be modeled kind of after the NFL. And I think for the medium fan, or the fan that might not be interested in college football, they might be more into that because they'll understand it. For me, though, seeing what's happening to Oregon State and Washington State, I think it's awful. I think their economies are going to be severely affected by it. And, it has me wanting to dive deeper into the FCS in the group of 5 because I have no interest in watching Oregon and Rutgers play. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, well, there's no more Bedlam series, right? I mean, they're just getting rid of everything, which is just so crazy. Yeah.
And these are like 130-year-old rivalries. One of the things that I loved about college football that drew me to, that's where my heart is at with sports, is college football and college basketball, is the fact that these teams have played to get this. You're playing in the same stadium that your grandfather played in. You know what I mean? Like, and you're playing that same rivalry.
Yeah.
And to throw that aside, just, part of the thing, just like you touched on with week 0, and why is it called week 0, is college football has been dysfunctional. Now, unfortunately, it's dysfunction is now in the hands of TV execs. And I don't believe they have the pulse of what's right for the sport.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all about TV rights. That's what it seems to be that people are fighting over. You know what's so interesting? As I started watching the Netflix documentary on the Florida Gators, have you started the Swamp Kings yet? I believe it's called Swamp Kings, right?
Yeah.
Well, what's so interesting when you talk about how things started in college football, mobile quarterbacks started in college football, and Urban Meyer with these kind of position, like the Christian McCaffreys of the world that we see now in the NFL, all started in college football, and I didn't really know that until I started watching this series.
Look, I think a lot of people don't realize mobile quarterbacks, and I'll even take it a step further and say like black quarterbacks. Like the NFL was very late to say, well, and college football was like, wait a second, this guy's pretty athletic. We should probably put him with the ball 90% of the game, and college football has been that way in every capacity. I mean, just recently, a couple of years ago, this was a failure, but Presbyterian University kicked an onside kick after every score because they thought their defense was bad. Now it failed, but I love the innovation of it. I remember asking Mike Leach, who passed away, was a big time friend of our show, and I asked Mike Leach, like, hey, are you ever curious about making the jump to the NFL? And he's like, NFL is great and everything, but he's like, I love being in college where the innovation is still every team is you have this, one team running the triple option, the other team running the air raid, one team running the run and shoot, where you have this crazy innovation. So I think it's one of the things that could get lost in the future with the makeshift move to make it more like pro football, the NFL.
Yeah. You already hit on, obviously, Oregon, Washington being, a terrible realignment, but what would you say is the worst, or some of the worst?
Well, none of it makes sense to me. Like that, I think that's the biggest thing, is like Rutgers, although they did play the first ever football game in the 1860s, they haven't been good. And it didn't make sense for me that like certain schools are getting a pass. Oregon State and Washington State have been pretty good historically. Yeah. So why they're basically just getting left out because they're from small towns and they don't draw a gigantic TV number, if it was on the field play, I would understand it more. But you have certain schools, Vanderbilt's still in the SEC. They haven't been relevant in a very long time. No. So you see certain schools and just get a pass and certain ones don't, and it just seems terrible. But I would say, to me, the worst is definitely what the Big Ten's doing. I think the SEC still kind of make sense geographically, but what the Big Ten is basically the entire United States. I keep joking saying, what's next? They're going to go for Hawaii. And I wonder if it'll work long term, because short term, and I don't know how it was for you growing up in San Jose. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I got to see firsthand rivalries that mattered. When it was college basketball, you'd have your neighbor with the Georgetown flag. One neighbor would have the Maryland flag, and another neighbor, North Carolina Tar Heel fan. All regionalities, and that's something that they bonded over. You have the barbecue in the backyard with the family, and you're sitting there saying, oh no, North Carolina's going to beat Virginia this year, or going to beat Maryland. And to me, I don't know. I think short term it might work, but I wonder long term if it works. And I hate all of it, man. I mean, I really hate all of it. So
Well, one, nobody likes change, and then this is such a huge change. Like you said, hundreds of years are just being uprooted and changed, for money and for rights. And I totally agree with you. One thing too is that now these kids are traveling so much more. One, from like a school perspective, I just kind of don't like that because I know that the athletes are mostly there to try to go pro, but I think that school does matter. I mean, they are there to get a degree. How does that impact that? But also from a betting perspective, how are you kind of factoring in these long travels that these kids are doing? Is that going to impact the way that you bet on these games or possibly the lines?
oh, I think 100%. I mean, I think I've always had I've always been a strong believer in like in college athletics in general. And if you have to hit the road, you normally lose. And the further you go, like when USC is playing UCLA, you don't really worry about,
No.
about that. But if they got to go to Corvallis, if they got to go now to Iowa City or wherever, I think that will play a bigger role now. But you also see back to the original point that you were saying, you know, they can stop faking like they care about the student athlete.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they've been doing that for a long time, and I think this is fantastic in that capacity because you see, I mean, it's sad in my opinion, but you see that they never cared. They never
No.
cared.
Well,
So
now that the
yeah.
kids can make money, they're like, whatever. Let's just ship you across the country every week.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the thing that is frustrating from my point of view is like we didn't have any leadership, and we've never. That's the reason why we have a week zero called a week zero when it's week one. Like part of the beauty, the part of what I liked about it is the unorganization of it. But damn, we could have used someone to sit there and say this is not morally right. We're going to be
Right.
sending our and football at least is only one time a week. But
Yeah.
when it comes to
Right.
basketball and all your other sports, you're
Yeah.
going to be living at the airport. Just start paying rent at the airport because they clearly don't care about the people. They're just going for the check.
But that's also just put so much pressure on the students because, their teachers are still going to be riding their butts, you know what I mean, to get their homework and their tests in. They leave no time for
Yeah.
them to go to school at all, which to me just seems incredibly stressful. Curious what you think about the NIL deals that the athletes, one, I think it's great that they can finally get paid. Also, Reggie Bush suing the NCAA. Curious to get your take on that. But do you feel like it muddies the water now that these athletes can get paid and a lot of money?
Not no. I'm pretty much pro that. I think if anything, it might make it a little more open.
Yeah.
Like SMU tried this in the 1980s, and there's a 30 for 30 about it on ESPN called the Pony Express, and I think it's only fair. Before teams were cheating and they were doing it under the table, and
Yeah.
I can remember reading a story. I think that Sports Illustrated wrote probably 20 years ago, 15 years ago, about a kid from LSU and who got paid under the table to go to LSU, and then he went to a party. He was interested, I think, in a girl at Ole
Okay.
Miss. Now he's at LSU as a freshman. He goes to Ole Miss. They cut off his electricity, right? They cut off and it was his mom's electricity because he was
Just because he went to a party?
they were threatened by the thought that he might transfer to Ole Miss, so they cut off. So that was all being done below the table, right?
Wow.
So having it now to the forefront where NIL
Yeah.
and the players can have the power. And I know some people, as much as I'm a traditionalist, some people really are even more over the top, saying, "No, you can't do this in college sports." What was happening before, and it was happening
Yeah.
probably a lot nastier.
It's
So,
scary.
yeah, yeah. To me, this is a good thing. The players deserve it, especially when you talk about now. Like we just talked about the travel, but they've always deserved it, in my opinion. And yeah, I feel like we're getting right there. And maybe all this realignment is to counterbalance that, so a small school can't just say, "Hey,
Yeah.
here's $5 million, come play for us," because the power brokers want to stay on top. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I
What's
feel
that?
like it's changed even like Bama football, it's made the SEC and these other schools a little bit stronger. So it's not just Bama every single year because
Yeah.
I'd rather make money than play for Nick Saban, probably.
Well, I've always said that too. Like I knew that they were cheating before. I
Yeah,
mean, a lot of
please.
the SEC schools, because I'm like, wait, why is every kid from LA going to
Yeah,
Tuscaloosa? You know
right,
what I mean? Like, I
right.
get it. Okay, they have a good football program, but I've been to Tuscaloosa, Alabama. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I can. It just some questions, I would
Uh-huh,
say, but
uh-huh.
you saw it just the other day. Missouri landed the number one recruit in the nation, and that would not normally happen. You've seen it with Deion Sanders having the effect with grabbing Travis Hunter at Jackson State. I know
Yeah,
now he's at Colorado, but you're starting to see that shift. It's still going to be, I think a lot of the power schools that have the money, like the University of Texas, has
yeah.
endless money. Texas A&M has endless money, so they're always going to be in that national race. But I still think it's gonna equal things out some. So I think it's a very good thing for the sport.
Reggie Bush deserves his Heisman back. What do you think?
Yes, I
Yes.
mean O.J. Simpson has a Heisman Trophy. What are we doing?
Okay,
Yeah,
yes. Good point.
right? I
Good
mean,
point. And
um,
he was I was living I went to fashion school actually, but I lived in and around USC and I graduated in 2006, so right in the time the Matt Leinart and the Reggie Bush, and he was just electric. He was the most exciting player to watch in college football that year, and it's just crazy that they could strip it away from him. And it's not even the way that it all happened didn't even seem sinister to me.
well, I mean, they bought his parents a house, but my problem is do we really want to open the hood
Yeah,
of all the Heisman Trophy winners? Because
right.
if you did that, I think you'd find a lot more that might have got houses or cars or bags of
Yeah,
cash. So yeah, that's the double standard there, and the NCAA used that as an example, unfortunately, and I think Reggie Bush should be able to win. I mean, I'm curious if he will be able to win, but I think
yeah.
morally he should. He's in the right, I think.
Yeah, and he won't give up either. I mean, I feel like it's been years of him fighting for this. All right, given the NIL deals, given the realignment, what does college football look like in 5 years?
I'm gonna,
The sigh. Oh no.
I'm an optimist by nature,
Yeah.
so I'm hoping there's not some separation. Everyone keeps saying there's going to be a 50 or 60 team separation from the
Wow.
rest, and it will form its own mini pro league, almost like the NFL. And I hope it's not that, because at that point, what have we done to this thing that was supposed to be about college kids? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I like seeing the small school against the big school, or the small school. Look at Boise State was a community college in the 1970s. Look at it now. You've seen, the progress that these schools have made, and I think they deserve a shot at the table. I think
Yeah.
that's what's more American than that. What's more
Yeah.
American than I work for SGPN. We started this in a garage in 2011. You know what I mean? And now we have a studio, and now we. I just think you gotta give people the chance. And what is college athletics here? What are you really doing? We're trying to improve people. You know what I mean? Like, we're trying to improve people, but so I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that yes, we'll have this 12-team playoff.
Hmm.
We don't have the separation, and small schools will still have a seat, just one seat, and the SEC and Big Ten and Big 12 probably continue to grow. I think they're probably going to end up at like 24 teams, so we will have like
Okay.
72 that are making way more money than the other schools. But I think they're still going to schedule them. I hope to God. So there we go. That's my
Yeah.
projection, and it will be exciting to see, at least.
It will. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're looking at top 25 rankings and a Heisman Trophy watch here with Colby Dant. You're watching Moxie Bets. We'll be right back. Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words, Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the type of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. All right, welcome back to Moxie Bets, presented by Caesars Sportsbook, here with Colby Dant of the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, talking college football. All right, Colby, let's take a look at this top 25 college teams. Georgia, number 1. Okay, yeah. Then you got Michigan, Ohio State, Bama, LSU, USC, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, and Washington to round out the top 10. Thoughts on this list? Anyone missing? Anyone overrated?
Yeah, I mean, I have a little bit of an issue with putting both those ACC schools in the top 10, Clemson
Mm-hmm.
and Florida State. I mean, I think Clemson. See, the problem is also with ranking, a preseason top 25 rankings, which I hate is, you're just it's like a popularity party. It's like
Okay. Yeah.
so Clemson obviously they've been great over the past 10 years, maybe even a little bit more,
Well, they had,
and
yeah,
yeah, they
they
had
had a good
Trevor
quarterback for a
Lawrence.
while.
Yeah. But I feel like they haven't been as good lately. Now they did go out and get Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's brother, as the offensive coordinator, and he's probably going to be fantastic. If I had to bet, I think yes, they're going to be very good. But they have regressed in the past couple of years. And then Florida State, I get it. They went out and bought everybody in the portal, and
Yeah.
they have a lot of talent, but they did beat just two teams with a winning record a year ago, and
Mm.
they also played about I think it was 3 or 4 straight schools with a backup quarterback. I just think there's always a little East Coast bias, and I grew up on the East Coast. There's
Yeah.
always a little East Coast bias because I personally thought they kind of like Washington, perhaps Oregon State, Utah should probably been in that mix a little more. There seems to be a little disrespect towards the Pac-12, and I think that's maybe just the national narrative of the Pac-4 and the other teams are leaving next year to the other conferences. But that stands out to me is they gave the ACC a little bit of a pass more than the Pac-12.
I do think that the East Coast is bigger on college football than the West Coast is because I think there's so many states on the East Coast that don't have professional teams. And so I think that's like when you said growing up in DC and everybody was really I did in San Jose, at least I didn't grow up, it was all 49ers. Of course, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s when it was Joe Montana time. So what
Yeah.
else would you possibly look to do? All right, so let's look at some way too soon college football championship odds. Georgia Bulldogs plus 230. Then you got Bama plus 650. Ohio State, Michigan, USC Trojans, LSU Tigers, both at plus 1,000. Are we going Bulldogs again here?
Well, I certainly think they'll be in the playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
the unfortunate thing that's happened also is you get like the schedule protection. Like Michigan and Alabama. I'm sorry, not Alabama. Michigan and Georgia have incredibly light schedules. They both canceled. Michigan was supposed to play UCLA. They were supposed to play a home and home the past 2 years. They canceled that, and so they don't really play a Power Five in the non-con. And then Georgia was supposed to play Oklahoma, and they canceled that. So unfortunately, you're seeing like the top two teams,
Yeah.
kind of benefiting off of scheduling lighter, which is never good. But I like both those teams' chances to be in the college football playoffs just because of
Yeah.
that. So obviously, but Georgia's breaking in a brand new quarterback. Stetson Bennett actually played like as much as I feel like people gave him a hard time about his 30 years in
Age.
college. Yeah.
He's the same age as Matt Stafford. I feel like they got two old guys
Yeah.
on the Rams now.
Yeah, and that's another thing we didn't even talk about with college sports. Like you're getting 7-year quarterbacks. You're like, what's
Huh?
going on here?
Right.
But I think Georgia will be right in the mix. I think they're definitely going to be in the college football playoff and the SEC championship. But I would like to take, with your odds, I
Mm.
like taking a flyer on Michigan or how about the LSU Tigers? I think the LSU
Not
Tigers,
bad.
yeah, Brian Kelly, year two, year one, he loses the first game of the season on a blocked extra point to Florida State. He's a lot better on the offensive line and defensive line than he was a year ago. And, I just feel like another year in the system. Everyone's going to know
Yeah.
what he wants on the offensive, defensive side of the ball. He beat Nick Saban last year. Now this year has to go to Tuscaloosa. But they have a veteran quarterback. And what have we seen? Stetson Bennett was 35.
Yeah.
You're winning the national championship. You kind of need a veteran quarterback. Joe Burrow was in his senior year.
Yeah.
So I like any teams you can circle with that. That's my one concern with Georgia is like if you find yourself in a big time game, you don't have that veteran quarterback. You probably have a very talented quarterback, and we're going
Yeah.
to see they have three different guys. But so I would lean Michigan and LSU for the value. And if
Yeah.
not that, then just go chalk with Georgia. I actually don't like Alabama's chances this year.
Ooh, I love to hear that. I will say I went to a game in Tuscaloosa. It was LSU versus Bama, and it was and look, I've gone to a lot of football games. Obviously, I go to a lot of NFL games. That it was the most electric experience I think I've ever had. Well, one, I felt completely underdressed, and I was just wearing normal football stuff. But these girls are like, first of all, it was like 30 degrees, and they're in like mini skirts and light jackets, and heels, and I'm like, I don't even know how you. They didn't look cold either. I don't know how, but none of them look cold. I was freezing in my puffer jacket, but just the light shows and the songs that they sing. Every song on the radio somehow had Alabama lyrics, and everybody in the stadium knew it. The tailgate, I would say, wasn't as fun, I think, because it's on campus. Maybe there isn't any open flame. It's a little, like silver and like white tablecloth for me. But the actual game itself was just, it was amazing. I would go to a Bama game all the time.
Yeah, that's the passion that, to me, college sports brings. If you find the pockets that are really, I went to a Tennessee Volunteer game in Knoxville not that long ago, and that was fantastic. I ended up like on a pontoon boat tailgate, and then then the whole town is like you. What's amazing about once again back to the small towns, it's is like you have this like little town, and out of nowhere, so you're like bar hopping, and it's like just small little bars. Then all of a sudden, this gigantic stadium. And that's kind of the blueprint for a lot of these schools, or college basketball, college football. You get those crowds with the passion. To me, there's nothing like it in American sports, in my opinion.
Oh no, I was saying roll tide in my sleep, because you just walk next to somebody and say, roll tide, roll tide, roll tide. And I'm like, yeah, let's roll tide. One thing about Michigan, though, since that is kind of your value pick, Coach Harbaugh, with this like self-imposed, suspension that they've given him for the alleged, lying. The suspension that they gave him are all pretty easy games. Like they could do without him for these. But what do you think of that situation?
Well, I'm all over the place on this one. Like, yeah, I could see him. I could see him lying. I could totally see him lying. But I can also I do have a problem with like the national media narrative of like he broke the restrictions during COVID. Where if you look around, Tennessee just got caught and the NCAA didn't do anything. Tennessee was doing the same thing. Arizona State was doing the same thing. To me, if you put a microscope on any big time program, they were doing it. So I'm reluctant to believe I feel like sometimes you turn on the TV and they're like on their moral high horse of like, how could he during the COVID? And look, I'm not even trying to make it about COVID. I just know that everybody was doing it. I know that everyone big money is big money. So in one regards, I think man, he was doing what everyone else was doing. So I have no problem with it. And then the other regard is I love the fact that they self-impose it before it gets worse.
Yes.
Right before conference play, you can come back.
Yes, right literally, like these easy games where we don't really need you. That's fine. But I will say, I think that it has a lot to do with reputation. Harbaugh does not have a good reputation. He didn't have one in the NFL. He doesn't really have one now. He is a special personality. He's a winner, but he rubs a lot of people wrong. And I look at it even like with the NBA and someone like Draymond Green. Draymond does something, they're throwing the book at him. Steph Curry does the same thing, nothing happens. So I feel like his reputation, unfortunately, but also well-deserved, is the reason why people are up in arms about it.
You're probably dead accurate there, because love him or hate him. I enjoy that about him. I enjoy that I never know what he's going to say or how he, most of the thing he says, you have to decode. You're sitting there what is he really saying? But yeah, I think you're probably right.
Yeah, I think it's a Harbaugh problem. All right, let's look at the Heisman Trophy winners. Caleb Williams is the favorite. A lot of NFL teams going to be tanking for Caleb, specifically, I think the Arizona Cardinals. And you got Jaden Daniels, Quinn Ewers? Ewers, Ewers. Who do you like to get the Heisman this year?
Well, here's the thing, is that you got to have a team that's going to be winning. That's changed a little bit. I feel like 20, 30 years ago, you would kind of just if the guy's putting up unbelievable stats, he's at least considered. Now it's it's become super quarterback driven, and also normally you got to be in the mix at least for the playoff. Now you don't necessarily have to make it. Obviously, Caleb Williams didn't make it a year ago, but so you got to kind of look at, you want to have them aligned with how you think their team progress is going to go, so I have a couple. The first one that jumps out to me is Carson Beck, who's going to be starting at Georgia, because this was a big time recruit. Now I haven't really seen him play at Georgia because Stetson Bennett was there, and before that was JT Daniels. But so the schedule's soft, but this is a guy that, like I just said, I know they're going to be in the mix. So it's worth the value play. Now, this with the schedule being so soft, I'm a little paranoid that they might be up by so many points
Right.
that they might bring in the backup. So you need to have the stats to back it up. Obviously, Caleb Williams is the best quarterback in America as far as college football goes, and he certainly could. And a guy hasn't won the back-to-back Heisman trophies in a long time. Most of that reasoning, I feel like, is from a marketing point of view. But I actually like a long shot in Jalen Daniels, a quarterback for Kansas. Kansas. Now, this is all dependent, and this is why it's a super long shot. The guy's a stud as far as like putting up points, stats, everything. The team has to have a good season, and that is the hard part. There is like, I have them as a surprise team in the Big 12, and we saw TCU do it last year, and all of a sudden Max Duggan, who was a backup to start the season, became got invited to New York City and almost won the Heisman. So I like a shot on a guy like Jalen Daniels because I know he's a stud. It's just Kansas has to win, and that's the big if. Like 6-6 isn't going to cut it. You have to be 8, 9, 10 wins to be in the mix.
Yeah.
And I think it's a decent value play. So give me Carson Beck. Give me Jalen Daniels on a crazy long shot, and then I'll stay with the Daniels last name and go with LSU's. So there's Jaden Daniels and Jalen Daniels. Maybe you just go with these Daniel brothers and
you just go with the Daniel brothers. I love that. One interesting thing I heard, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this. So Caleb Williams, obviously out of USC. I know they have Stenson Bennett and Matt Stafford, but what about the Rams tanking for the USC guy? I mean, how LA is that?
Oh, I mean,
I hate imagine the USC quarterback goes to the Rams. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, that could, and obviously, I think imagine if they go to the playoffs this year, the whole city's going to be buzzing about him already.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I could totally see it. I personally can't stand tanking, so I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I could you make a lot of sense.
If anyone's going to do it, I mean, this is a team that leveraged their entire future in order to win a Super Bowl at home. And I would argue, and I'm curious what you think. SC football runs LA more than the Rams ever would. I feel like people love SC football more than they like the Rams. And I just feel like to keep it in, it's just such an LA thing to do, and something I think the Rams would do. Because I think that Matt Stafford's going to retire here pretty soon. I don't think that Stetson Bennett is necessarily the answer for them moving forward, their franchise quarterback. I just think it's something to look out for.
No, I like that. I like that take. And yes, I would say USC would be the number one fan base in LA.
Yeah.
Then probably the Rams, then probably UCLA.
Yeah, definitely. And I still think that the Dodgers and the Lakers have a big. Well, to be fair, there was no professional. I mean, they went back and forth, but there hasn't been a consistent professional team in LA. All right, Colby, you get into this argument a lot with Sean and Ryan. How do you convince people that college football and betting on college football is better than the NFL or any other sport?
Oh, well, I mean, there's 133 teams. To me, I feel like the NFL, I actually look, and I grew up a diehard NFL fan too. I watched every Sunday, with my dad and stuff, but I find it to be, out of all of the major sports, I think it's the hardest to bet on.
Really?
College football, yeah. I think I would rather bet on NBA and MLB than
NBA. You'd rather bet on NBA than that is wild.
Look, I like the NFL better than the NBA. Like if you told me what I gotta watch, I'm gonna watch the NFL all day.
No, but I find NFL betting easier than NBA betting because NBA, it's like anything could happen in those final 2 minutes. They could score 15, 20 points.
Yeah, look, and the NBA definitely has the players sitting out now, which is a new factor. But I don't know. I mean, to me, college football, you can really find edges. There's 133 teams to cover. I feel like we as a society don't do a great job covering a lot of those schools.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of value in those ways. And then if you understand the game, you understand like there's a lot of differences in college football, as I alluded to. If you're playing a triple option team, if you're playing there's so many variances of football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like where the NFL has it's kind of the same
True.
blueprints for the most point
True.
on every team.
Yeah.
Whereas like if you know football, you're like, whoa, they're playing this team who you know they've run the ball really well and they can do things special teams wise. That's another thing. Kicking at the hashes as opposed to kicking in the middle of the field like the NFL does. There's all these different angles to college football that I think make, if you know the game, I think you can find edges on.
Okay. It'll be interesting this year too, right? Since a lot of those matchups that you're used to seeing probably have a pretty good handicap on, like you said, Washington versus Rutgers. That's not really something you've seen before. So it'll be maybe a little bit fun too, right? To handicap these new
Rivalries, rivalries. No,
Yeah.
new matchups. That it'll be interesting, especially you got the Big 12 going to 14 teams for this year, and you got teams in Florida playing Oklahoma. So there is that fun side of it. I personally dislike it, but I mean, I think it'll be fun to watch, and maybe it'll be harder for me to handicap based on that.
Yeah.
That conference, you used to playing your conference foe so many times.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you got this other team way over here. What are they doing? So
Right.
maybe.
Yeah. The only thing I can equate it to is like if all of a sudden the Niners were not playing the Seahawks anymore and I had to handicap them playing the Panthers, I'd be like, that's not something we normally see. But anyways, Colby Dant, thank you so much for joining us today. Host of the College Experience on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. You can follow him at the Colby D on Twitter. Anything that we should know about that's going on over there at SGPN?
Oh, I mean, every Friday night.
VSiN.
Yes, VSiN, the Sports Gambling Podcast. Sean and Ryan will be in Vegas every single Friday night on VSiN, which will be part of. Look, when you get the NFL ticket on YouTube,
yes,
you get VSiN automatically. While you getting that package, so VSiN, VSIN. Check out the Sports Gambling Podcast every single Friday night, talking NFLs, and I host the College Experience. We break down 133 college football teams, and I also host the FCS College Football Experience. So we dive deep.
You dive deep, and trust me, if you want to follow anyone with sports betting and college football, this is the guy to do it. Colby, thank you so much for your time. I know that you are a very busy guy. This has been Moxie Bets presented by Caesar Sportsbook. Don't forget to follow us on social, and we'll see you next time.